Hi, I'm Dr. Dan Ratner. As part of our how-to series, today I'm going to help you to understand the unconscious mind, as it is so key in understanding why the mind-body process works as it does and what to do about it. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below and I will answer them directly. Okay, today I want to talk to you about the unconscious mind. One of the reasons I felt that I needed to do this video is a lot of times people talk to me about how do emotions work, how does doubt work, how does power work, and I realized that as we talked that a lot of assumptions about the unconscious mind are really not being spoken. I don't know, it's hard to know what happens in the general therapy community with this, but I have a sense, and I have a good sense of this being a therapist, that it doesn't get talked about in the way that I would have liked to know about symptoms. So again, I'm going to talk about the unconscious, not just generally, but especially as it relates to symptoms. We did a video this past week on nighttime symptoms. Well, I want to do a video on daytime symptoms just separately, when you only have daytime symptoms and not nighttime symptoms. But this will be a kind of lead into that, because the key to daytime experience with symptoms is to understand the unconscious mind and how it works. Here's the thing. The unconscious mind does not operate on the same principles as logical conscious thinking. It's completely different. So here's what I want to do. I want to give you a sense of how it works. And you can use these rules to track your symptoms and understand what they must mean in the unconscious language. So here's a couple of things to know about the unconscious. There's a rule in psychology that in the unconscious, there are no opposites. Now, what this means is everything that's happening in the unconscious, the opposite is also happening. So what you wish for, you fear. And what you fear, you wish for. It's very strange. It's not the way conscious thinking works. Here's another example. The symptoms can be hiding and communicating at the same time. In fact, this is exactly what is happening. This is why Sarno talks about symptoms as a distraction from feeling, and I talk about symptoms as a communication. Well, they're really both. It's both because that's the way the unconscious works. You can love and hate people or things at the same time. In fact, this is completely normal. Any parent will tell you they love their kids more than anything, and they despise them when they're torturing them or they're taking away their independence. You have to recognize that unconsciously that's true. Consciously, it probably isn't. Consciously, you probably love them and feel like, I don't want to ever hate my kid. But you do at certain moments. This is the thing about the unconscious. It flows also. It changes all the time. So it's not all one thing. Remember, there's no contradictions in the unconscious, so it just flows around wherever it wants. Another example of that contradictory thinking is you can want to know what's going on in your symptoms and not want to know at the same time. So this might help to explain some of how the symptoms work. Here's another fact about the unconscious. The unconscious has no sense of time. What this means is everything that happened in your childhood, it's like it's happening right now. This is why all of your traumas from the past can feel like they are happening currently at an unconscious level. And this is why the fight or flight response of the body can be so revved up at a given moment when nothing really seems to be happening. Well, if there's anything even reminiscent of your childhood past, it's there in the unconscious. And even if it's not reminiscent, it's lying dormant. It's like it's happening all the time. In the unconscious mind, everything is happening at the same time. It is the most illogical being that we have, and we all have it inside of ourselves. This is why danger can feel potentially annihilating. This is why it can feel like you're being chased by a lion when really you are just having a conversation with a friend that you're nervous about, as an example. This is also why shame can be so devastating, because it brings you back, or it doesn't even bring you back. You're simultaneously a baby or a little child, and you can be so humiliated and the threat of annihilation so big that this can lead to sudden suicidal ideation. So there can be suicidal ideation from a depression that's kind of always there, but when it's sudden, that tends to be about the fact that the unconscious mind has no distinction about time. It thinks it's when you were a baby right then, and that you're an adult, and that you're a little kid, and that you're a teenager, all at the same time. And it doesn't even have to bother with the distinctions. It doesn't have to bother with the logicalness of it. And this is why the world can feel so dangerous so much of the time. And I'm not saying it's not dangerous in other ways. And, there can be, in any given day, somebody can get upset with us in a way that can feel hard, or an accident can happen. All kinds of actually dangerous things can happen, but they generally don't. The reason it can feel so dangerous to someone who has had a lot of trauma or difficult experiences, or even just somebody who always wants to do good and is worried about people being upset, is that in the unconscious mind, it's all lurking all at the same time. Now, if that didn't make it complicated enough, here's another fact that will. Another saying in psychology is that the unconscious knows all. What does this mean? What it means is all those things that we try to hide, we successfully hide from other people's conscious selves and from our conscious selves. But the weird thing is the unconscious is communicating with other people's unconscious, and we all know everything. I know this sounds insane, but we've done enough studying of psychology to know that this is how the unconscious actually works. This is why you can get an instinct about something, or you can sense that something's coming before it happens, because the unconscious knows all. I'm not talking about ESP. This is actually not, it's not hocus pocus or things like that. What it is pattern recognition. Your brain knows what's going on. Now, I will say this. The unconscious doesn't know all about everyone. It knows all about you. You are a closed circuit with yourself, and it knows everything about you. And the body is part of that unconscious. So the body knows everything that's happened to you and everything you felt, and it's all going on at the same time. You can pick up on unconscious processes in other people, but you won't know nearly as much as what you know about yourself. And this is part of why we can feel intense shame, because at some level we know everything about ourselves. And if you walk into a party and you're feeling bad about yourself in some way, well, it's there with you, and unconsciously you know it. But this is why getting to the core narrative is so important in feeling at peace with yourself, because otherwise you know something without knowing it. So when I work in the power column and I work to get people their core narrative, and for those of you who haven't watched the other videos yet and are just watching this for the first time, a core narrative is a positive but accurate view of yourself that encompasses the basic facts of your life and how it has impacted you. And what I like to build into the core narrative is then, and what would be the action step that you're going to take to make that better, to make yourself shine and feel happy and at peace. When you have that piece of information, it's not unconscious anymore. So it takes some work, and the body is the thing that's going to tell you what you need to know to get that core narrative in place. Once you have it, you know where you stand, and no one can alter it, and as a result, you won't feel nervous about knowing all. At some level, again, totally unconscious, you know everything about you. When you have dreams, you're trying to communicate with yourself. When you're having symptoms, especially in waking life, you're trying to communicate something to yourself. And it's about something that you actually know. I know this sounds mysterious, but it is very important to know how this part of your brain works. Sometimes people say, oh, we only use 10% of the brain. That's not true. We only know about 10% of the brain that we use, even if that stat is correct. The brain's using all of the brain, and included in that is all of these unconscious processes. Here's one thing I want to say about all of this stuff about the unconscious, and I'm happy to entertain any questions about it. I can explain why I think what I think, why it fits with the evidence, it fits with science, it fits with logic. I wouldn't be saying it if it didn't. But there is relief in knowing about the unconscious, because once we accept that the unconscious knows all, then why hide anything from ourselves? Why not just let it all in? That is a very helpful thing that people can do that can alter symptoms quite a bit. Now, here's another aspect of the unconscious that needs to be talked about because it's a big deal when it comes to symptoms. Aggression is everywhere. It's everywhere inside of us. It's everywhere inside of every single living being there is. You know, it's a world of evolution, And at some level, we have this primitive aggression in us, but we also have non-primitive aggression where it's, somebody upset us in some way that is a little less elemental. But either way, there's a lot of aggression. Sarno talks about anger as the key to recognizing what's causing symptoms. Symptoms can be caused by lots of different things. They can be caused by emotions other than anger. They definitely can be caused by rage a lot. I talk about the fact that they can be caused simply by doubt. Their onset is usually an emotion, but they can be perpetuated by doubt. They also can be caused or perpetuated by power. Either way, it's good to factor in the idea that in the unconscious, there's lots of aggression. We're mad about all kinds of things. We're mad about being mortal. We don't like that we die. We don't like that we got brought into the world without being asked. There's aggression built into being a human being. It's good to know this about the unconscious experience because then you can start to understand what are your symptoms really saying. Here is another fact about the unconscious that I want to give you that's very important. Conflicts in the unconscious drive towards the surface. They want to be made conscious. That is where symptoms come from. It's the drive to make them conscious. It is a communication, even more than it is a distraction. But it has to be a hidden communication. That's how the unconscious works. We know there's no contradictions in the unconscious from what I've said. And this explains why it works the way it does. So when people ask me, well, why do symptoms behave the way they do? Well, given the way the unconscious works, now we have some idea of it. These are some of the rules of mind-body principles, especially the emotional world, and why it works the way it does. So we're protecting ourselves from knowing certain things, but we're also making sure we don't forget them at the same time. Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, is all about that. It's about the fact that the body will not forget it. If you want to forget it, you can consciously try, but unconsciously, where is it remembered? In the body. And ultimately, our feelings want to be known. So let me talk about one other aspect of unconscious living. This is definitely a little bit of psychological jargon, so bear with me, but a lot of this jargon has become pretty regular in society, regularly known. So one term is the ego. What the ego is the part of yourself that has to deal with reality. There's another part of yourself which was called the id, which is about all the parts of you that just wants to have pleasure. It doesn't want to have to deal with anything bad. And then there's something called the superego. I'm really getting into jargon, so feel free to ignore the jargon if you want, but it's fitting to something that I'll make a little more easy to understand. The superego is about judgment. It's about doing things the right way. And the ego has to manage the part of you that just wants the pleasure and the part of you that knows I got to do the right thing all the time. So all of that conflict and the unconscious knowing all of it, it's got to deal with it somehow. And this is where psychological defenses come from. Psychological defenses are efforts to deal with the conflicts within ourselves. If you want to forget all the jargon, that's all you need to know. We have unconscious conflicts within ourselves, and a part of you has to deal with the reality of that, and that leads to defenses. Now, here's something that you could feel actually kind of proud of about having mind-body issues. It is the most mature defense you can have. It's the last stop on the train of defenses, the mind-body process. It's basically falling on the grenade for everyone. And this is why what Sarno called goodists tend to get it. The people who are looking out for other people, who have a very strong sense of empathy, who are responsible, who can be perfectionistic, who really don't want to get anything wrong or cause any harm. They end up using defenses that don't hurt other people. They hurt themselves. And this is why you hurt in the mind-body way. This is not true for everybody, but it is true for the vast majority of people who are mind-body sufferers. This is also why, and I'm saying this to show you the evidence of this unconscious process and all of that stuff making sense. This is also why, as people become better, they tend to have more symptoms. When I work with people in therapy, when they become better able to relate to other people, when they're doing things better in their lives, they're more likely to develop symptoms because it is a very developed psychological defense. This is also why pain comes on after having kids or retiring or surviving a trauma or any other vulnerability. We get a new level of understanding in life And that wisdom is great, but it comes with movement in your unconscious world. Suddenly, that part of yourself that needs to deal with the reality and all the conflicts shifts around, and you need a new psychological defense. Well, trauma leads to wisdom, and wisdom leads to the mind-body issue. So if you're having this issue, you can at least give yourself a pat on the back that you are evolving. Now, obviously, we don't want you stuck in pain, so that's why I'm doing this podcast, is to give you ways to deal with this unconscious experience. One thing that I talk about when it comes to the power column, though, is that your unconscious is actually fighting for you to feel powerful and good. But often this conflicts with the messages that we get in our families or in society, generally speaking. In fact, I have found that society wants people to have lots of doubt because of their own aggression. And what ends up happening is that the strongest people get attacked the most. People who are doubting themselves, they want to bring those people down. They want to have them doubt also. The job of the mind-body sufferer, or really anybody, is to hear the message of the body and give yourself permission to be powerful. This actually aligns with that unconscious mind, and it will make it so there isn't such conflict. That is why being powerful is so important in getting better from these symptoms. Doubt generally is there to prevent you from becoming powerful. And this is why emotional awareness and the power columns work along with the doubt column. They all affect each other. If you have lots of doubts, you feel less powerful. If you feel more powerful, the doubt comes down. If you're having a lot of emotions, that can make you doubt what's going on. It gets very confusing, or it can make you feel less powerful. So they all interact with each other. But if you understand what's going on in the unconscious mind, you have a leg up in understanding what is happening. So knowing how the unconscious works is very important in understanding what the body is telling you and also what you want to do about it. As an example, if you understand that the unconscious actually wants you to be powerful and you're having symptoms, well, then being powerful is one of the solutions. This is part of how I came up with my system, is understanding how the unconscious works. So I know that was a lot of potential jargon, but I want you to fight through that and hear at base, what was I saying about how the unconscious works and why it makes sense with everything we're seeing, and gives you a bit of a roadmap. There's going to be lots of questions about this, I'm sure, but put them in the comments below. I'm happy to answer them. One last thing is that the unconscious experience and how it works is a big part of how we get to our core narrative and the power that we're looking for in the power column. So there's a lot of this information that I felt would be helpful to get out to you now, so we can start to talk about how does it relate to these three columns? How does it relate to the action steps that you develop? There will be more videos to follow, but I'm glad we have this out there so that you can refer back to it to understand it. Thank you so much for watching this. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below and I will answer them directly.